Can I now just move slightly over to the international sphere on something you touched earlier, China. So how can the UK strike the balance between its international trade ambitions and foreign policy objectives, especially regarding championing human rights? And so the way you've brilliantly previously put it, prosperity, security, values. How does the United Kingdom come to the right relationship with the United States, with China, taking those three different factors into account?
Well, again, you won't be surprised to hear, Ray, there's no easy answer to this, because most of the difficult foreign security policy questions that are looked at, for instance, in the National Security Council or in the Cabinet, are, as you rightly point out, a balance between these three interests: the security interests, the prosperity interests, and the values interests. And the government has faced this particularly, for instance, over Huawei and Huawei's involvement in the 5G technology rollout in the UK in the telecommunications sector. Because from the Huawei, there was a very strong economic case for using Huawei, because we wanted to roll out 5G as quickly as possible for economic reasons. Huawei was the leading operator in the telecommunications 5G network, and therefore not using Huawei had a major economic cost for this country. On the other hand, there was a security threat because Huawei is a Chinese company, and Chinese companies are under an obligation under Chinese law to cooperate with the Chinese intelligence agencies if they're asked to do so, and therefore there was a risk of espionage, even sabotage in times of crisis if Huawei is in our critical national infrastructure. And then there's a values argument as well, saying that is China the sort of country, it's not a democracy, look what they're doing in Hong Kong, look what they're doing with the Muslim Uyghurs in the west of the country, in Taiwan, etc. And Huawei themselves are heavily involved in things like facial recognition technology, which is being used against the Uyghurs and against Hong Kong. So that is the balance, and different ministers, different governments will come to slightly different outcomes on it. The current government took a view that we should exclude Huawei entirely from the 5G network because the values and the security was more important than the short-term economic cost. Previous governments have taken a different decision on that. So there's no easy answer. Clearly, for a country like the United Kingdom, which is an open trading democratic country, which relies on being able to trade internationally for its prosperity, having just left the largest single market in the world in terms of the European Union, it cannot afford not to have an economic relationship with China, which is the second largest economy in the world, and in 10 years' time or so will be the largest economy in the world. So we are clearly going to have an economic relationship with China, and we are behind some of our main competitors like France and Germany in terms of our economic links with China. But at the same time, we have to protect our values and defend our security. So getting that balance right is going to be one of the biggest challenges over the next 5 years.
And can I just clarify, just to seek clarification on that? And you're absolutely right. I think we've seen from a parliamentary perspective, we saw with the David Cameron's premiership, we had the president of China in the UK, and therefore pushing on prosperity. Then we had Theresa May, which some would say, and I could say as a parliamentarian, looking at it from when you're sitting in the chamber, where are we going with these issues? You saw more of a security, push on security. We saw the Theresa May push on security, some would say, with the relationship with China, and now people trying to figure out where does the current Prime Minister Boris Johnson position lie with China. We've got the Magnitsky-style sanctions announced by the Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab, but they're not being imposed. We've had those imposed on Belarus. We've had them imposed on Myanmar. But question that is on everyone's mind is if we are going to be consistent with our approach and standing firm on our value spaces, then why are we not imposing those sanctions on China? And where does the Prime Minister's position stand on China with regards to his two predecessors?
Well, I don't want to comment on individual sort of prime ministers and where they stand, as I served for two of them when I was in the National Security Council. But you're absolutely right, of course, in your analysis that the emphasis did shift with the change of prime minister, and that's not unduly surprising. But what I can say is that you cannot, a lot of commentators, a lot of NGOs, for instance, would expect Britain to say, we have our values, we must defend those values, promote those values, and therefore we should not have any dealings with any countries or individuals that go against those values. Frankly, as a practitioner of some 40 years, I do not think that is a realistic possibility for government. It's easy to say in opposition, we should not be dealing with Saudi Arabia, say, is another case. Should we be selling arms to Saudi Arabia because of Khashoggi, because of what's happening in Yemen? We shouldn't be dealing with China because of this. We shouldn't be dealing with Turkey because of what they're doing with the Kurds. But if you take that to its extreme, you will not have any form of relations or strong relations with any countries around the world, because democracies are a minority of countries around the world. So by no means, around less than 30% of countries in the world are democracies. And you have to deal with all countries if you're going to be a global player. So I think we have to not fall into easy sort of ideological traps. If I may quote someone from a little bit further back, but in my time, Jack Straw. Jack Straw, as Foreign Secretary, was a great advocate of we will have an ethical foreign policy. Well, that approach by the Labour government in 1997 lasted about 12 months and then was dropped because they realised that when you're in government, it's not quite as simple as that. And Tony Blair was developing a policy, a concept of humanitarian intervention, and we were involved in conflicts across Europe, in the Middle East, and in Africa. We had to promote our arms industry, if you like, and sell weapons to countries that not always agreed with us. So, I think it's not easy, government, and you have to be able to choose. It's right for Parliament to question these policies, but I think a broader understanding of the constraints is also important. So that's the reason why I say we have to have a relationship with China, but equally, where we fundamentally disagree with what they're doing, like we do in Hong Kong, we should try to hold them to account for that.
Yeah. Can I just ask a question on that? With regards to China and looking at our closest international ally, the United States, of course, political observers, looking on from outside would have seen the United States President Trump had his own, kind of approach of dealing with China. And some thought that would then change with the Biden administration. But the Biden administration, one of the first things they did was to say they are not going to challenge the genocide, the position of the United States with regards to what's happening in the Uyghurs and in China. So that was one decision. They came out quickly to say, we support and accept the genocide definition being applied with regards to the Uyghurs in China. So with that being the case, I know that's the discussion going on in the British Parliament at the moment, but from a ethical perspective on values, surely the United Kingdom should be pushing ahead with this Magnitsky sanctions on China, individuals linked to what's happening with the Uyghurs, but at the same time, continuing a relationship dealing with security and trade. But on this specific issue, standing with our United States new administration in Washington on what's going on with the Uyghurs.
Yeah, I think certainly one can look at using the Magnitsky Act on Chinese treatment of the Uyghurs, just as we should be using it on Russia and those Russians who are involved in assassination attempts in the UK or suppression of Crimea, etc. So I'm not absolutely against that, and I don't think that would necessarily damage our economic links with China, which are obviously beneficial. But I wouldn't be in favor, for instance, of the sort of grand gestures like suggesting that what is happening to the Uyghurs was genocide, because I think there is a slight risk of devaluing the term genocide, and it's not clear to, which is a legal term, although people's definition of it varies somewhat. You know, it's not clear to me that under the Genocide Convention that what is happening to the Uyghurs would qualify as genocide. But, you know, different lawyers have different views on that. But I think it's that sort of wider policy, which I think we need to be cautious about.
I think on the
is a different thing.
I think on the what's going through Parliament at the moment, I think it was the point on the genocide was with regards to the genocide legislation that we have at the moment is not operable, and therefore allowing the courts in the UK to decide if a genocide has been committed or not, and then referring it back to Parliament. But before we get too much into that, I've got a few more questions on China for you, Sir Mark. So how do you then, address the different competing challenges that we have around the world in engagement with China? I'm looking at The Economist, and it says America views China as an economic and a strategic competitor. It has told Middle East countries not to get too close to China, but many countries see it as more of a reliable partner in the international world at the moment. And then we see a comments by the Iraqi health minister who says aid to the Middle East went to Egypt, Gulf, Iran, Iraq, straight after China got its own house in order with COVID. It was straight there with experts and vaccinations to that part. And he then goes on, this is the Iraqi health minister, to say, however, from the United States, we got a single veil. So we've got the position with regards to China and what it's doing with economic interaction with other parts of the world. And I'm going to go back to another one. So you've got the full picture. I go back to the chairman of the Defense Committee, his tweet again, and this time on the 16th of February. This is a new Cold War battleground. China is a way ahead of us, gifting, and this is to Lebanon, APCs, weapons, vaccines, power stations, and road tunnels. And underneath having a caption saying the UK has donated 100 armored patrol vehicles to the Lebanese. So when you're looking at the different economic influence that we have, and you see and you're the former High Commissioner to Pakistan, the Belt Road Initiative with that China is taking forward with many countries, and you see China is not part of the Paris Club with regard to writing off international debt, and you see what's going on in Africa as well. So how do you address the challenge that we see from China in a geopolitical world at the moment?
Well, I think the fact that China is sharing its vaccines with other countries, to take that specific case, is not a problem. I mean, the vaccine, as I understand it, is not proven to be effective. The Russian one, on the contrary, it does appear to be quite effective. But nonetheless, if they are sharing vaccines around the world as part of their soft power diplomacy, then why should we object to that? I don't think that's a problem. The British government has gone a different way by supporting COVAX and giving money to COVAX and allowing them to buy the AstraZeneca virus and putting that around the world as well. So that is just more soft power competition, if you like. Of course, they're doing it for a specific political reason, but then so do we use some of our soft power for political reasons. So I don't think there's anything to complain about there. In terms of China's economic weight, I mean, you're absolutely right to point out that, China is now the #1 trading partner of more countries than America is. So they have a very large network of countries who are largely dependent on them for economic purposes. Now, that is a challenge which is a long-term challenge for the United States. I don't think it's a challenge for the UK directly, because we're not aspiring to be one of the sort of superpowers, the two superpowers. I think managing the US-China relationship is absolutely critical. As you rightly pointed out, President Trump did it in a slightly eccentric way, as was his wont. But Joe Biden's policy towards China, its substance is not going to be massively different from that of his predecessor.
Yeah.
Tone will be different. It will be a lot more moderate. It will be a lot less erratic. But that is a bipartisan policy in Congress and the United States Beltway. So I think there will be a tough competition between the United States and China for the next 15 years, particularly in the fields of technology, and that will determine global security as well as global prosperity going forward. You know, we are a relatively small player in that overall focus. However, where we can play a role, and I hope we will do so at the G7 summit, for instance, in June, is bringing together those countries that have a different value system from China, the democracies, if you like, of the world, the D10, it's sometimes called, the Democratic 10 countries, to decide collectively how to manage China. Because it's, you know, America can take certain steps towards China that the United Kingdom can't without significant cost. Take Australia as an example. They have found quite severe revenge, if you like, economic revenge being imposed by China because they are saying things that many other countries also say, but can get away with it. With Australia, they suddenly find they can't sell their beef or their milk into China because it gets blocked. So it is a challenge for smaller countries to take a stand in a way that America can get away with it. And let's not forget that, yes, America and China are competitors and rivals and potentially enemies, but they are also cooperating to each other, you know, hugely on the economy. You know, they have a massive economic linkage between the two of them. So they are dependent on each other as well as being competitive. And we need to try and develop a relationship whereby we have that economic links that we need with China, but at the same time, we are not compromising on our values and our ability to speak out. And that is a challenge that this government's going to face. And it's going to be a challenge for any government to get that right balance.
And can I just ask you a specific question? So people listening out there don't know how, you know, with regards to what are the options available to the United Kingdom when we see China take certain, you know, what I think all parliamentarians would say unacceptable steps with regards to what it's doing in Hong Kong, as well as the Uyghurs, but in Hong Kong, you know, the action that China has taken. We see your foreign secretary call on to say we condemn this, and I know we've recently again done that with regards to the arrest of 47 individuals in Hong Kong. Realistically, what are the options available for the United Kingdom at the firmest action it could take with regards to what China is doing in Hong Kong?
Well, we have raised the issue internationally. We have obviously made diplomatic representations. But beyond that, the most important step, and one that we have taken, is to provide a gateway to citizenship in this country for the millions of British national overseas citizens that live in Hong Kong. And that is a very brave and audacious sort of policy option that this government has taken that has infuriated the Chinese. But it's something that we can do that they cannot prevent. They can try and prevent these individuals leaving Hong Kong, but in practice, that would be very difficult. So that is, I think, the most important step. Of course, we have certain treaty obligations under the agreement that was reached in 1997, the Joint Declaration, etc. We believe that the Chinese have infringed that, violated that, and we need to draw that to the international attention. But we can also sanction individuals, as you mentioned, through the Magnitsky Act or in other ways. But we have to be realistic. We are not going to be going to war with China over Hong Kong because we don't have the ability to do that. The Chinese know that. That is a power imbalance that we just have to recognize. And we can jump up and down as much as we like, but that is a reality that isn't going to change. And I think it's important for people to understand. I think they do understand that. But, you know, there's always a demand, particularly from commentators and the press, for Britain to be involved in absolutely everything that goes on in the world. And why isn't Britain doing this? Why isn't Britain doing that? We saw that just in the newspapers today. Well, you know, we are not the world's policeman. We've never had or at least not for 150 years, had the ambition to be the world's policeman. And we have to be cognizant of that. And that does limit our options. What we can do is be on the right side of the line and help those who do have that power, like the United States, to act as a benign world policeman. But, you know, I think sometimes we, certainly, as I say, commentators in the press are demanding Britain takes action on every single injustice that happens around the world.